So, the IF, International Astronautical Federation, is the organizer of the International Astronautical Congress this time, and it provides a unique platform for dialogue and cooperation. What are we expecting from these events?
IAC 2026 in Antalya, its theme is World Needs More Space. So that is what we're going to be actually trying to emphasize on this year. And what does it mean? What does world needs more space? I have three interpretations for that, essentially. The first one is very basic. It simply says that the world, the humanity needs more space assets, more space technologies, more things in space to essentially enhance humanity. The second one, it's probably more important, which is really related to the fact that space is not only the backyard of very large nations, it is also a working space, working environment for smaller nations. But the last interpretation relates to the fact that world really needs more space in the sense that we have to give world a break. We have to treat it better as humanity.
Yeah, as you said, about space is not only the backyard of big nations, and Turkey is hosting the International Astronautical Congress for the first time. So what does that tell us about how Turkey's position in the global space industry is really changing?
And Turkey, when they did their candidacy, the government at the very top level said that we really want to support this conference at the very highest level, and we want to make sure that we get this. So this kind of tells you about Turkey's level of interest and ambitions in the space field. Turkey really wants to be a player in space. For that reason, what Turkey is doing, it's actually doing a lot of investment in government projects. There's also some private industry that is going after some projects. Turkey may never be a very large space nation such as US or China, but it still wants to be a significant player in the field, and it has to develop its own technologies, niche platforms and services, so that it can become a significant player in space.
Turkey's national space program set very ambitious targets, including reaching the moon, and you mentioned that just now. But some of those timelines have slipped. So how realistic are Turkey's space ambitions today?
First of all, yes, there has been some minor slippage in the lunar program. You know how things go in space programs. It's actually a very ambitious and difficult project. We're talking about not a small probe that is going to go to the moon. We're talking about a probe that is going to be more than 3 tons. And the launch is already scheduled for next year, early next year, 2027. The first 6 months of 2027, our probe will be launched into space, and using our own rocket technology, we'll be essentially taking that probe from the Earth orbit. We're going to send it to the moon, and that propulsion system, which is a hydro-rocket propulsion system, is a novel and entirely indigenous system. And this probe has a lot of scientific instruments on it. So when it reaches the moon, it will probably spend something like 6 months in the lunar orbit. And it will do a lot of science, looking at different things like water on the surface and other scientific experiments, including some radiation-related experiments. So this project is happening, and it's going to happen in the very, very near future. So we're very excited about that. And we also have a number of private companies working on satellite constellations for navigation and communication. That is also very exciting, development for Turkey, because private companies and commercial space is obviously quite important. We also are working on a commercial spaceport, not within Turkey. Our geography is not perfect for that because we're in the middle of everything. We can't really easily launch rockets. But we're actually looking for an international spaceport. We're developing that, and we'd love to essentially launch our own rockets and potentially host other people's rockets as well, so that we can essentially be a player in that area as well. Some companies in Turkey are also building geo satellites, and as you know, these geo satellites are the largest things that you can have. They're very, very, very large systems. So things are happening in Turkey. What I have to say here is Turkey has a very large industrial base. We have a lot of companies building a lot of different things. and a very dynamic and reasonably well-educated young population. So that's an ideal combination for a nation with aspirations in space.
I also want to talk about your expertise, and you have spent much of your career developing rocket propulsion. So just how important is it for Turkey to have the indigenous propulsion technology, and where are we right now?
Yes, rockets are difficult. I've been working on rockets for more than 30 years. Rockets are difficult for two reasons. The first one is they're highly nonlinear, which means that a very small change will generate a very large end result. So even today, when I fire a new rocket, which I have fired thousands in the past, I don't know what's going to happen. So it kind of makes them exciting. The second difficulty with rockets is if something goes wrong, it is a spectacular event, a lot of fire, explosion. So it's not like having a blue screen on your computer. So the consequences are also fairly difficult. Despite the fact that it is a difficult engineering task, what Turkey is doing, it is actually developing a lot of its own technologies to develop what we call launch vehicles. And Turkey has been doing this for more than 10 years now. Companies like Roketsan, which has government funding to do that, but we also have commercial entities like Fergani Space also trying to develop indigenous and also commercial space launch systems. We think that it is very important to have launch capability for independent space. That is why Turkey is kind of pushing that area as well, very strongly. And I think my prediction is we will have in the near future, within 5 years, space launch capability using Turkish rockets and essentially flying Turkish or international payloads into space.
So tech independence is essential, so is international cooperation. So where do you see the greatest potential for China and Turkey to cooperate in space, like satellites, launch technologies, or lunar exploration?
We already are, collaborating quite a bit, China and Turkey. We are both part of an organization called APSCO. But I think the most important thing we need to do between China and Turkey in the field of space is to get into academic collaboration. We have to have, I think, in my opinion, student exchange and faculty exchange programs. We have to have joint programs. By doing that, we can essentially get into the future programs. We'll essentially understand each other's technologies and cultures better. One area of, I think, great collaboration in the future could be lunar. I think it's not only Turkey and China. I think for internationally, lunar exploration requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of very difficult technical project problems that needs to be solved. Beyond that, it's economically so demanding that it's not one nation's interest to get into it. I think it has to have a lot of countries working on this very difficult problems. And I think it is very important for humanity, for these countries to kind of collaborate. And Turkey and China definitely should do that in the future.